to the Truth in This Art. I am your host. I did it with flair. I am your host, Rob Lee, and I'm excited to welcome my next guest, a freelance commercial and documentary photographer with over 15 years of experience working with professional athletes. Some of his clients include Baltimore Magazine, Under Armour, and the Baltimore Ravens. Please welcome Shawn Hubbard. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I'm glad we're able to make it happen. I mean, you had a real, situation, real injury. I had a talent injury. I was like, I'm not gonna.
It's been a long road. I got COVID, and then I got my knee injury. So thanks for being patient with me while I got better.
No, absolutely. I wanted to have you on here. I mean, I dig your work, and definitely your work pops up a lot in the searches that I do. So seeing your stuff, I'm just like, let's chat.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
So before we get too deep into like the crux of the story, I want to get the story. I want to get your story. What is the Shawn Hubbard story? And maybe your first sort of memory of your, love for photography or your love for capturing images. Tell me about that. Tell us a bit about your story and maybe that first photographic memory.
Sure. Well, I grew up as sort of the artsy kid. I got voted like most artistic, but in high school, it was more of like painting and drawing and kind of the fine arts stuff like that. I think it was like my junior or senior year in high school. That's kind of when Photoshop was. I can't remember if it was the first version, but basically we were like shooting film, but then scanning it in and then taking it into Photoshop and just doing some like basic adjustments to it. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I had a love for it at that point. I didn't really know what I was going to do. Basically, between then and college, decided I was going to try graphic design as my major because I didn't really know what a career in the art field would look like. And I knew I wasn't going to be selling paintings on the street corner or something like that. So I thought graphic design seemed like a good way to balance being artistic with something a little bit more business minded. My mom was the free spirit artist, was like, do whatever you want. And my dad was like, how are you going to make money? And, you need to have a career. So I sort of landed in the middle of graphic design. And, at the time I really enjoyed that. I went to Penn State University. How that program works is basically you do prerequisites and leading up to applying for the graphic design program after your second year. So I had been studying to be a graphic designer. I had taken some photography classes as sort of electives, and I applied to the major and I didn't get in. And I was absolutely heartbroken because I sort of put all my eggs in one basket. And then you're allowed to apply again. So I met with like the dean of the arts program, was like try to get advice, and like my parents came, because of course like you're my mom for the first time, like someone told her baby that she wasn't good enough, right? So I applied again, didn't get in again. So like, okay, well, like now I'm really screwed. So like, what am I also gonna do? I'm 2 years in college. And where I landed was photography, because honestly, that was like the only other practical thing that I had done and had experience with that I liked, that I thought I could do something with. Again, looking back, I was so naive about the photography industry and what a career as a photographer even meant. I really had no idea. I don't even know if I researched it, but I started out doing photography as a continued major. And again, like in college, I was more of a jock in college. I was playing sports and I was living in the rugby house, and I was not living in a community that was like nurturing for anything artistic. But so as I was going through classes, I kept getting feedback from teachers like, you're not doing up to your potential, like you're not really trying your hardest. And that was like the case. Like I was getting good grades but I was just kind of doing the bare minimum to like fulfill my assignments. And luckily, things worked out in the end. But it wasn't really till after I got out of college, and I actually started working for a photography company that did like studio portraits, youth sports, school photos. I mean, that's how my first, how I learned to light things was like yearbook photos. I mean, if you can believe that. But meeting a few people in the photography industry, and then kind of just like going out on walks and just doing stuff for creative sake. That's where I really remember kind of falling in love with photography, like photographing people. Like when I was in college, I was, just doing like still lifes and things like that. But once I got out and I started photographing people, that's kind of really where I found something special with it.
Thank you. Yeah. Being able to, you run into like, oh man, this is not going to work for you. This is not the lane for you. Like, all right, what's the other thing? What's the other thing I can do? And I think we all have sort of that shift when you start off with something creatively inclined, and it may not be, someone may not see sort of that talent, or you get a no, and it's like, all right, what's the pivot? What's that going to look like? I've said it before on here that, early on, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and it didn't work out. It was just like, no, thanks. And I was like, oh, all right. So what am I going to do now? And kind of, traveled around a little bit. And I liked hearing that, kind of, I think sort of hitting that sweet spot for you was, photographing people, like being around like folks or what have you. And I think I've been podcasting for a while, right? Years at this point. And the ones that I like, and doing that, like I can do it by myself. I used to do a podcast, and I'm going to give you the name of it because it's so ridiculous. It was called Robservations. And it was just basically, I don't know if you watch Family Guy or what have you, but it's that sketch when he was like, what grinds my gears? It was literally that. So it's just me ranting for, about whatever. And, I found that when I started doing the pod, regularly with a friend here and there, and that felt a certain way. But when I started doing this podcast and talking to people and helping them share their story, it's a whole different thing. It's, skills that I didn't know I have that I was able to kind of like cultivate. And, hearing from folks, oh, that was a good conversation. That was a good interview. I don't know what's good or what's not good. So, but I have a sense of like, this is what the aim is. This is what the sort of goal is with what I'm doing creatively. So, I'll lobby it over to you from your vantage point. What's something that makes like, photography good? Like what, let me say that differently. When did you feel like you got good at photography? Tell me about that.
Hopefully tomorrow. I don't know. I'm a pretty rough critic of myself, but like that's like the age-old question, like what makes photography good? What makes art good? And I think sort of like the blessing and the curse is like it's like this undefinable thing, right? And different people take away different things from visual mediums that they see, and so it's hard to really quantify something being good. Honestly, I won't say when I thought I was good, because it's weird. But I think something that photographers try to achieve in their career is developing a style, which I think is more important sometimes than being good, right? Because sort of photography is very competitive in the fact that so many people have access to the tools to create good photography, whereas 10, 15 years ago, there really wasn't this, access to professional equipment to the everyday consumer because it was too expensive. So now that the market is flooded with people able to take great quality pictures, good doesn't really have a meaning anymore. Like it's not challenging for most people to take a good image. It's kind of, you have to be able to create imagery that stands out. Like that's the number one most important thing, is like you have to be able to stand out. And developing a style, I think, is the first step to that, because you're creating something that's recognizable, that when people are looking through imagery, they can say, oh, I know who took that photo. I can see that representing my brand. So, I think it was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, where I felt like I was getting feedback from people that like they could recognize my work, and stylistically it was cohesive. But again, like I'm revamping my website now, and I'm looking at my work now, and I see stuff that's just like, it's all over the place. So it's like it's an ongoing process. I'm still, as far as evaluating my work, I feel like I'm not where I want to be. I'm a perfectionist. I've always kind of had that drive in me of sort of never settling, and always wanted to try to improve and learn and grow and get better. I think that's important for any artist. Like once you think you've gotten good, or once you think you've reached the pinnacle, like it's over for you, So I'm not getting any younger, so I have to constantly, sort of like reevaluate, reinvent to keep up with, different creative trends and just try to stay relevant.
Thank you. That's a great answer to that. I definitely put you on the spot there.
That's all good.
No, but I agree. Like, when I'm doing this, the fear, I suppose, that I have at times is I don't want to feel like it's disposable. Like, oh, I'm not interested anymore. Those sort of thoughts, those are the sort of considerations. So it's like, how do I keep it interesting? And, how do I try to keep making sort of, this is my style, this is my approach, this is how I'm going about this as a brand, as a type of storytelling or what have you. And, it's at the end of the day, it's like I'm trying to impress myself with what I can do and how I can go about it. So like, I've said it before, put out 300 podcasts last year, 300 episodes, and that was a lot of stuff.
That's nuts.
It's insane.
Man,
it's insane. And so doing less this year, but wanting to do something else in addition to it, whether it be community oriented events and things of that nature, to kind of broaden what this is and kind of stretch what the boundaries of it is, and always kind of tinkering. I think that's the way I kind of look at it.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's like, again, as I'm looking back through my archive and trying to put my best foot forward with a new website, is like tinkering, man. That's a great word. Is like I'm like revisiting old images and kind of starting fresh. I look at images that I did post-production on like even 6-7 years ago, and I'm just like, God, what was I thinking? That looks terrible. And then I go back to the original image and I sort of like make it where I am now. So I think that's important, because especially with visual medium, like, I think the goal of most visual artists is to have something that's timeless. It's especially relevant for brands, because with like fashion and technology, things get outdated so quickly. I was looking at images that I'm considering for my site, like of like shoes that I took, like an athlete was wearing a specific type of shoes, and I'm looking, I was like, I love the imagery, but the shoe looks like it was created in 2012, which is like, it's like, it looks like 2012. It doesn't matter how cool the imagery looks. So I think, kind of breathing life and just meddling, like just trying new techniques. Like as an artist, I think, people don't think about it as much with photography. Obviously, some photography that I do, the documentary work, it's shot, it's edited, and it's done forever, right? Yeah. Whereas like some of the more creative imagery that I do, I'm able to go back and revisit it and see if I can, change the color, contrast, whatever, to make it look sort of a different way.
It's sort of this thing where you're balancing, maybe sort of part of the overall product is from a certain era, but you're like, all right, I want to make this something that's transferable, like, and that's something that's going to live on. So, and looking at sort of some of the conversations there, are instances where I'll interview, someone more than once. And it's like, yeah, remember we did that interview 3 years ago? Yeah, I was wrong then. And you'll hear from people, it's like, oh, wow. And it's like, you really did listen to the episode you were on. Or, yeah, man, I was really talking about my 2019 stuff. Now in 2023, I'm a completely different person.
Yeah.
Some people are going to listen to these interviews back to back and notice the difference.
Yeah, I mean, but that's growth, right? I think like whether you're a podcaster, whether you're an artist, like, it's just like a human thing. I think growth is like so important and so essential. Whatever you're doing, I think it's a natural part of doing it. And I think growth just is so important to whatever you're doing, to have longevity and to keep it relevant. So I would, if I listened to like a podcast I did 4 or 5 years ago, I would hope I would sound different. I hope I have a different outlook on things. So that's only going to help me, grow and progress as an artist.
I'm going to try to, in those instances where I get invited on to be a guest, I'm going to try to just see if I can say the same story like every time. I'm going to see if it works that way.
I'll never find out, because the sound of listening to my recorded voice, I tried it like one time and I was like, this was the most uncomfortable experience ever. So I've never gone back to listen to any of the recordings that I've done for that reason. So it's great for me because I don't really have to worry if I repeat myself. The only people will know the people that listen, and they probably won't say anything about it. So it's fine.
That's me visually. It's like, oh, Rob, let's do a photo shoot. Nah, skin's a little dry. Start looking at every imperfection that I have. Like, you could, you know what? You could do a little touch up on that one. That's, a little bit more work there. So let's talk about some of your early like photographic like influences, like, and what are some of your influences now, whether it be, stuff that plays a role in it. Like, for instance, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. So that doesn't, it's very few. And the types of podcasts I listen to are not like interview based. It's like history based or what have you. But I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I listen to audiobooks that are from some of them are like based on text from like 50, 60 years ago, because I want to tap into something there. So that definitely has an influence in how I approach maybe questions or the type of questions I'm asking and so on. So for you, what are some of those influences that, were there for you early on, and some of the influences that are there like now?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, photography stylistically was a lot different than it is now. But like some of the guys that I remember kind of like when I was out of school and kind of just figuring out like what commercial photography was, like Joe Yell, Tim Tatter, Gary Land in the commercial world, and then obviously do like live sports. Al Bello, who's a really established Getty photographer. Those are some of the photographers that stuck out to me that I sort of latched on to. And actually, Tim Tatter became a friend and a mentor of mine who I still work with, on a regular basis. And that relationship's been really essential for my growth and sort of opportunities that have come my way. And now I would say I'm sort of at that point in my career where I try not to be too inspired by any one person, because, like I said earlier, I think the biggest goal and challenge that you could have or should have as an artist is sort of create your own voice, and not, you can spend a lot of time, I've fallen into traps like this over the years of kind of finding something that really inspires you and then going out and trying to do something similar, and really you're just kind of creating the same thing over and over again. And if you look at the artists in this space that are really successful, they're the trendsetters. They're the people where you see something, you're like, I've never seen that before. And that's what sets you apart, right? It's creating stuff that you're setting the trend. You're not following a trend. So I try to, you got to toe that line where you try to gain inspiration from certain things, but really have it be able to be applied in a new way. Yeah. But, guys like Carlos Sorrell, and sort of the way he lights things and how he shows movement. Jay Kolsch is a photographer who I just kind of came across last year. He does a lot of adventure stuff with Filson. I just love how he sees the world and how he tones his images. And then like portraiture, like Joe Pugliese, is a photographer out on the West Coast who's just a masterful portrait artist, and guys like that. I'm an absorber of visual media every day, so I think a lot of it comes more from like little things here and there. I started following more directors and DPs, and I just how the color in their images and the toning in their images has definitely had more of an influence on me in the last 2 years or so. I don't watch a lot of film. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't watch a lot of movies. So I try to get exposure to that on social media. So it's about picking up little things here and there, and then seeing how I think a lot of what I try to do is like, if I get inspiration from the commercial world, advertising, I try to cross that over to like live sports. And then, similarly, like if I pick up on something in my documentary, my live sports work, like how can I inject that? So kind of like that cross platform, I think, is a way to kind of create a different and unique style.
Yeah. I like that. What would you say, like, 2 to 3 qualities that you're aspiring for in your work, or in those instances that you may see in like the social media, what have you? The social media sounds so old right there, but social media that you're like, that's a really good image, what have you? And I know good is a thing we talked about a little bit earlier, but that's something that really like catches your eye and strikes you. Because using social media, for example, we're in a constant battle for our attention. So when something really catches your eye, it's like, what are those qualities?
Yeah, I think the overarching thing that I've kind of used to describe this intangible thing that we're all looking for is I think and I kind of say what makes an image impactful is it's something, an image that for whatever reason can tell the whole story and that can make you feel something immediately.
Mm.
Like you've probably heard like, a scroll stopper, like what can make you stop scrolling? Like you've got such little time. I mean, I stop and think when I'm scrolling through social media sometimes, like how quickly I'm doing this as an artist, like just scrolling through. And it's just, so that's like how quick you have fractions of a second to get somebody's attention. So I think an image that can tell a compelling story in one frame and that can make you feel something instantly, I think is the key to, standing out and being unique. When I'm crafting an image, or if I'm working on an image, after the fact in post-production, basically what I'm trying to do, whether it be with composition, with light, with, backgrounds, is cutting away all the distractions between the viewer and what I want them to feel. So the less distractions that you have, the quicker the experience is for who's viewing your images. And that's really what you're striving for. Like, especially on, social media or on a website, if I had like a creative director, art director that's looking at my work, even if it's in an in-person interview, like you have very little time to make that impression. Mm-hmm. So the quicker you can do that. So anything that's not contributing to the image, like you need to get it out. You need to crop it out, move, do something so that emotional read is happening as quick as possible. So I think really that is the most important thing, what I'm looking for when either I'm making images or what kind of stops me in my track when I'm looking at an image. And now, like, what that is sort of the intangible thing, right? Like, it's not always, sometimes it's the light, sometimes it's the emotion of the subject. Normally it's something that I haven't seen before. It's a feeling. So that's that, constantly moving target. And it can be any of those things. So I think knowing that, in your tool bag as an artist, that you can use different things to create a mood or create a feeling. It doesn't have to just be like someone crying. It can be, how beautiful the light is, so you have a lot of things that you can use.
Yeah. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. It makes me think of, what people talk about on, let's say, even the dating platforms or what have you, of you're swiping this or what have you, there's something that makes you stop, because usually it's the image. Or I even think of, you touched on social media. I even think of like, Instagram was, mostly for photos, and then it turned into video, what have you. So it's even that much more of a sort of like your image has to be something that has those intangibles that's going to pull someone in. And I'll say it this way. I'm not looking for videos on there. Like the things that, I'm seeing on there, I'm capturing. It's like, wow, that's a really cool image. That's what I'm doing. It might be, sometimes it might be some words or something that's on there that's going to catch my attention because it's informational. But sometimes it's just a really striking fire image. And it's something that makes me feel something in that moment, that it's like, oh, I'm going to save this. Not even, or I'm going to share this. That's, what it is for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like, what makes you feel something. Like that's the advertising industry in a nutshell. That's the photojournalistic, industry in a nutshell. Is like you're trying to make people feel something. And that's got to be the number one goal, I think, that you have if, you want to make an impact. That's what brands are looking for. Like, emotion sells. Like people that are advertising our product, like they want you to love it. They want you to care about it. They want, to play on your feelings. So, and the same thing as like a photojournalist would do. It's like, if you're covering a story, like you're trying to have the viewer feel like they're there and feel the emotions that are going on there. So it's really the same in, all the photographic industries, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So I got a few more questions, and I want to shift into the gear question. So give us a bit of the rundown of like, so, what do you use? And, for as far as like capturing the images, post-production, all that good stuff, whatever you want to share in that vein. And then I have a second one, which I put in here, which I think is really funny, but I'm going to at least start off by offering that up for you.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too nerdy about it, because I think, I don't know, the gear talk sometimes gets a little bit overrated. But as far as like my camera gear, I use Canon gear. I've used other gear. I use Sony. I have like my personal cameras, like a Fuji. But I use Canon cameras. I typically use. I mean, I have a lot of lenses because I photograph a lot of different things. Most of the time, I like to use prime lenses, which are, you know, fixed focal length, like 35, 50, 85, because I just feel like I like to move around with my feet to create the composition versus like zooming in and out. Obviously, some of the live sports work that I do, I'm kind of forced to use zoom lenses just because of the nature of what I'm doing. And sometimes it's more important not to miss a shot than it is to have like the perfect cropping right out of the camera. And obviously, sometimes I can't get close. You know, I can't move around as much as I would like to. And then post-production, I use two programs. I use Adobe Lightroom a lot for my live documentary, kind of like my high volume, like work live sports where I'm taking thousands of images because it's just very quick for me to process. And then for most of my commercial and portrait work, I'm using Capture One Pro, just because I feel like it has a greater dynamic range. It handles color better. And then between the documentary work that I do, obviously, like there's not a lot of post-production on that. It's color contrast. Obviously, I do a lot of black and white. Yeah. And then, you know, some of the commercial imagery that I do is a lot more intense as far as refining and toning the images, just even from a color and contrast point. And then Photoshop, anytime I need to go in and actually like change pixels, swap something out, move things around, composite, stuff like that.
Thank you. So this is the more goofier part of it, the follow-up question to it. So we all, I think we all have those different items where you're like, man, this is the new hotness. I can't wait. This is going to be great. And you're like, no, it is not. It did not work out. I'm looking in my studio at pieces of gear that I've purchased for this production. That's like, nah, I don't use that at all now. Is there a piece of gear that comes to mind? You don't have to name, you know, the manufacturer or anything, but, you know, do you run into those instances? Or are you pretty like solid in knowing that, okay, I'm going to use this for this purpose. I don't need to try anything extra like crazy or what have you. Is there a piece of equipment that you're like, I didn't really use it. It wasn't great.
Every camera that I've ever bought. Yeah. Every single one, because like I said, I'm a perfectionist, I'm a gear nerd, I'm a quality nerd, and you know, like cameras come out every 3 to 5 years, and you spend like this, like if you're into gear, you're like checking like the rumor sites and you're seeing what's going to come out because you always want to do a better job and like what's the next feature. So you get like 2 or 3 years of these rumors and things that you know could be in the camera. And so you get the camera, you're super jazzed, and just spent all this money, and you're like, okay, like, yeah, it definitely does this, but then it's like, oh, you know, it's maybe not as good. They kind of overhyped this part. And honestly, that's happened with every single camera I've ever bought. And not to say that they're all garbage, but like there's always been this like, oh man, they almost had her. It's like they could have just done this. And that's probably just me being a whiner, but that if I had to say anything, it would be that.
I agree. I'm looking at, I got like a Stream Deck here. I'm looking at this Zoom mixer, and I remember like, I'm definitely like audio gear nerd, and I'm definitely checking the rumor sites, definitely doing a comparison, all of that different stuff. And I'm like, I'm using this for like maybe 20% of its capacity. I don't know if the other things do what I need. It's like my background as a data analyst, right? Like, sure, I can, you know, do my job and use the tools that I need to do my job, but I'm not diving that deep to say, let me learn everything about this application. I don't need to know everything about this application. And that's the way I kind of approach the gear that I'm getting, but I'm looking for something that's quality, something that I'm going to get some years out of. So like the mixer that I had to record this, it still works really well, but also the mixer is 8 years old. And I was like, yeah, I need to swap that. I need to upgrade that. And I have this smaller mixer that does a great job, but then also I have these other smaller mixers that I use for travel when I'm doing interviews at conventions or interviews on the road or what have you. And I'm like, you know, this is fine. This is cool. They have their different benefits and their different quirks and all of that different stuff. But, you know, it's never always what it's cracked up to be. And I'm never using it to its fullest capacity. Yeah,
I'm the same way. Like there's a, you know, like with cameras or even computers and programs, like they sort of tout like 1, 2, or 3 like main features, and then a lot of this like ancillary stuff. And yeah, typically like you're getting the most use out of like 2 or 3 main features that I really need and use for most of the work that I do, and then the other stuff I kind of just forget that it's there. Like the Canon camera that I have now has eye tracking, where basically like you look through the viewfinder and wherever you look, you can set it up that it'll set the focus point where you're looking, which is a pretty novel technology. Yeah. And it's like one of those things like they hype up, and then you get the camera and like you set it up and you just like, oh, this is cool, and then I just like never use it because it's honestly it's impractical for most of the stuff that I do because it's just not accurate enough. And then the few times where it's like, oh, I could actually use it, I just forget that it's there. So it was a major feature, and it's just like, okay, like it's not really, I care more about other stuff. So I'm at the point in my career now where like I'm not as gear hungry as I used to be. Like I'm at the point where I want to stop buying gear, and put that money elsewhere. Because I have most of what I need. So at this point, it's really just like splitting hairs. Most of the differences in equipment that I would buy now, my clients would never know. And that's probably been that way for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I think the biggest shift we've had recently was the shift from DSLRs to mirrorless. And I still think mirrorless has a little bit of way to go. But I don't think, my clients don't necessarily realize, like I could tell them what's different, but I don't think that they know what camera I'm shooting with at any given point or what technology it has.
Because, as you were touching on earlier, kind of like, everyone's gotten good at it. The technology is so good and all of that different stuff. And it takes the sort of talent or the eye or that approach that's behind it to really denote what one's brand is, what one's style is as a photographer. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, there are definitely certain features that like, cameras now take, 30 frames a second, and the autofocus is really good. And maybe 5 years ago, the same client that I was working with, like they were happy with the images that are getting. They don't realize that now, like I had to like pick like the worst image of a series because that was the only one in focus, where now that's not the barrier when I'm selecting images. For the most part, they're all in focus now, right? So now I'm picking more for the things I should be picking for is like, what image looks the best, which is the most athletic position of this person that I'm photographing. So it takes some of the things that you don't want to have affect your images out of play, and you can focus on just the creative aspects that you want to focus on.
Thank you. So here's like the last 2 questions. They're going to be combined, what have you. So earlier you touched on your athletic background, and so talk about, how, if at all, that kind of serves in your photography work, or have you working with clients like Under Armour, Washington Wizards, Baltimore Ravens. Like talk about that, like having that athletic background. Does that give you sort of a different perspective? Does that inform like how you kind of go about, like, I'm going to capture this image? Oh, I know he's going to juke in this direction, so let me make sure my eye is there.
Yeah. So I think it matters the most in loving and being passionate about what you're photographing, which I think is probably the most important thing, that will affect how good your imagery is, or, how creative you want to be. I think, and that's different than having an understanding of what you're photographing. Like, I think it's really important. It's what I try to tell young photographers is like, especially earlier on in their career where they haven't really latched onto one thing yet, is like, go photograph what you love. What are you passionate about? Go do that, because this is a tough industry. The photography industry is tough to be successful in and to stand out and to have a long, sustainable career to support a family. And you're going to go through tough times. And if you're not photographing and working on something that you're really passionate about, you're not going to get through the tough times, because money can't be your motivator, right? So I think from that perspective, being passionate about something is really important to the success of your work. I think having an eye for athleticism, I think that's important. I don't think you always have to be an athlete to have an eye for that. I think it's helped me. One of the things that I do think has been important is when I'm working with athletes, having an understanding of physically, what they're capable of and not capable of. If I'm giving them direction, like I know, okay, well, you have to adjust this to accomplish that. So I think just a general understanding of how the body moves in certain actions. I mean, I haven't played every sport, but I think that it does help if I have to say, okay, like normally if I'm working with an athlete, I try to just let them do what they do, right? That's if you're working with a world-class athlete, why am I going to tell them what to do? Well, sometimes for a photograph and it's still framed, like we need to see this logo, we need to see this side of the ball, and like we need to showcase this part of the clothing. So you have to make tweaks. And I think being able to jump in there and show them a different way to do it, having a little bit of experience of how the body moves in certain activities, I think has been helpful for sure. But overall, I think just having an understanding of the sport that you're photographing, but just really having a passion for it has always helped me. Like, especially a lot of my work has been defined by not necessarily the action, but the moments that lead up to that. The behind the scenes moments, the training for it, the difficult moments, the pain, the failure. Those are really the moments that have intrigued me. And because I'm a super competitive person, I feel those emotions and a lot of the stuff that I do. And that, I think that's what helped me gravitate towards that type of imagery. And that's kind of where my career started to take off, because those are the images that were getting more attention than like my action stuff. It was, the athlete in contemplation on the sideline with the sweat dripping down, and always being intrigued by the mind of the athlete and what goes into it, and the sacrifice and the difficulty that goes into it, I think has led me in that direction.
Definitely capturing the emotion around the game. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, and that's like, again, like creating a style, like that's been definitely the biggest part of my work, I think, that people have commented on. And I don't really know exactly. I think maybe it had something to do with I was an athlete, but like that's always where I've gravitated to, really, in all my work, whether it's sports or not sports. But I think that's such an important part of, again, if I'm photographing live sports or athletes, like you have wire services like news outlets, Getty, AP, thousands of photographers around the country just generating all this imagery of like, not, in some degree, like the same stuff, right? It becomes very, bland as far as what you see, like you're seeing what the news cameras see. So like anytime I think you're able to peel back some layers and show a different perspective and the more humanistic side of an athlete or sports, I think that gets people's attention. My goal, being more heavy into the sports photography world, has always been to create images of athletes and sports that people who are not fans of sports find interesting, because it's not necessarily a challenge to take a picture of someone's favorite athlete and create an image that they like, right? Most people, like, anytime like their favorite athletes in a picture, it's like the best picture ever because it's their favorite athlete, or it's like, a successful team. I think I've always tried to create images that someone who has no idea who this athlete is or what the sport is, or whatever, that they're like, oh wow, that's really cool. Like that's always been my goal.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm waiting for the really intense emotional moments of like cricket. I'm just waiting for that to come from you. That's going to be amazing.
Hey, I mean, hire me, whoever needs some impactful cricket imagery. Yeah, I mean, like that's, I would love to do that. I always love a challenge. Like I think I'm more intrigued by photographing sports that I've never photographed before with a fresh eye than I am, sports that I've had a lot of experience doing.
Yeah, we can, see your work showcased on ESPN The Ocho. It's going to be amazing. So I got a few questions on the rapid fire tip I want to hit you with, and so yeah, that's here we go. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink them. Because you said competitive, it has got me like, all right, now I'm just gonna have to just. It's like that thing where it's like, I'm gonna get the last word, and no, I'm gonna get the last word. So, what's your favorite number?
7.
Huh. Interesting. That's a number of chaos, by the way.
Okay.
I've learned that somewhere. I don't know. Mine's is like 24. Let's see. Favorite childhood TV show? You said you don't watch a lot of like movies or anything these days. So do you have a childhood TV show that you really dug?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
See, you get it. You get it.
It was between that and G.I. Joe, but I think I got to go with the Turtles on that one.
See, if you would have said G.I. Joe, would have asked you to sing the theme song, and we would have parted as enemies.
My screen would have went black. You know,
oh, I can't hear you.
What?
See, you're wearing purple. So Donatello, Leonardo,
Donatello was my guy. Yeah, he was like the nerdy guy. My brother was Leonardo. He got to have the cool sword, and I don't know. Like I identified with Donatello's sensitivity, like his ingenuity. My brother was way smarter than me. I wasn't the smart kid, but I don't know. Yeah, Donatello was my guy.
It's funny.
That's not why I wore purple today. I was pick up on that though. Maybe subconsciously, that's what it was.
my brother, because it's always when you have the boys or what have you, it's always like, yo, who's your turtle? And my brother's was Michelangelo. But now this is where it's weird. He was like, yo, you got two. I was like, really? He was like, it depends on which part of the week we're in. If it's like it's crunch time, it's like, you're definitely Raphael. I was like, and which might explain his red. But he was like, you also got some Leonardo there, because he was like, you tell people what to do. You know what the direction of things are. It's like, all right. He's like, yeah, fair amount of discipline as well. I was like, all right, I'll take it. What is your favorite color combination, like, to wear?
Oh man, I've shifted way. I wear so much black now. Yeah, I think I used to be like earthy guy, browns, greens. I kind of, like I grew up like, I'm a big fan of jam bands, so like very earthy. Like I won't say the word hippie, but like now, like my wardrobe is like olive green and gunmetal and black, and that's aside from a few other pops there, but a lot of it has to do with just like when you show up on like film sets and like everyone's wearing black, and it's just like you kind of like you don't want to be flashy. Like I mean, I guess some directors and photographers do, but I kind of always want to just be like a fly on the wall, especially like in documentary world. Like I'm wearing like all black. I just want to blend in. And that's and it's also like, I used to be like really obsessive on what I wear. And now like, I've kind of like taken a more like Mark Zuckerberg approach sometimes. It's just like, I have like 6 of the same black V-neck. Yeah. I have like 20 black hats. I have, so it's like, it just simplifies my life. Yeah. That I don't have to worry about that stuff. Cause sometimes I can get like caught up in like, that sort of thing.
So I tried to do that. I had this goal of, as I go out and do more things in the community, go to, openings and galleries and things of that nature. I was like, man, I just want to have the same black fit, man. Just slide into the background. And then I get this reminder of you're built like an offensive tackle with no pads, because I'm 6'4" and like over 300 pounds. So it's just like
blend in anyway, right? So
no, absolutely not. It's like, oh yeah. You see that big thing over there with the black on? Yeah, that's Rob. He's going to be here for this interview. What place do you want to travel to the most that you haven't been to?
Ooh, the most. That's a good question. That is a good question. Probably Australia, maybe. Okay. Yeah, Australia. I haven't done a lot in Europe, but I would say if I had to pick one, I would say maybe Australia.
Okay. And this is the last one I got for you. So in this scenario, you have to change your first name. What would you change it to?
Wow. That is so off the wall. Oh man.
And I'll give you this extra layer of context to give you a little moment to think here.
Yeah.
For like 2 years in high school, I didn't ask for it, but I had 2 different names. Like that weren't my name. It was just people. It was like, you know what? You look like a Sebastian. So your name is Sebastian. I was like, the hell? And it was another person who was like, you look like a Michael. So you're Michael. So whenever we would see each other in the hall, hey, Michael, I was like, that's not my name. It's like, you're going to have to start answering to it. And I was like, all right. Just grumble.
Though the best way I can answer that is I remember when I was younger, I had a friend named Shane, which is obviously very close to Shawn. And for whatever reason, I always thought that Shane had like more of an edge to it. It was like a little bit less common. So like thinking about it now, I'm cool with Shawn, but like I'll say Shane just because like that was like my childhood wish that I could be Shane instead of Shawn.
I like it, but Shawn gets the W's. And with that, see, boom, I thought I was really good with that one, actually. So with that, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm glad we got it. And thank you for making the time and chatting with me. And I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check you out. That's the website that's coming, the social media and all of that good stuff, the website that's being updated, rather. Share with the folks where they can check you out. The floor is yours.
Yeah, the best place now is Instagram, and it's at Shawn_Hubbard. So SHAWN_HUBBARD. Don't check the website now because it's old. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will know when I update my website. It's coming soon. I've been saying that for months now. Personal life has totally upended that, but it's coming. If I can ever get out of my own head and finalize it. But follow me on Instagram is the best place now. That's where I'm updating most of the time. And then when the website comes, you'll be ready.
So there you have it, folks. I want to again thank the great Shawn Hubbard for coming on to the podcast. Shawn, not Shane. Shawn Hubbard. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art and culture in and around your neighborhood. You just got to look for it.